She was forced by her family to marry her sister's millionaire fiancé in Coma. Unbelievable happened. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. The heavy oak doors of the mansion creaked open, revealing a young woman whose pale face betrayed both exhaustion and disbelief. Her name was Emma. She was 24 years old, soft-spoken, and known in her small circle for her kindness and patience. But tonight, none of that seemed to matter. Tonight, she was no longer a daughter, no longer a sister, but a pawn in a family bargain she had never agreed to. Her parents stood tall in the dimly lit parlor, their eyes sharp with determination. "Emma," her father said firmly, "you will do this for the family. There is no other choice." Emma's trembling hands clutched the silver chain around her neck. Her heart raced as her mother placed a folded contract into her palm. The papers smelled of fresh ink and legal weight, each word pressing down like a stone on her chest. She did not need to read the details. She already knew what was written there. She was being forced to marry her sister's fiancé, a wealthy businessman who lay unconscious in a hospital bed. The fiancé's name was Alexander Hart, heir to the Hart Enterprises empire. Everyone in the city knew of his fortune, his sharp mind, and his reputation for absolute control in business. But now, Alexander was silent, caught in the grip of a coma after a devastating car accident. His once commanding voice was gone, leaving only the steady beeping of hospital machines to mark his presence in the world. Emma's sister, Grace, had been his bride-to-be. Grace was beautiful, ambitious, and the family's pride. But with Grace missing abroad and Alexander incapacitated, the family's plan for alliance and fortune was collapsing. The elders whispered of contracts, of promises to investors, of reputations that could not afford to be shattered. So they turned to Emma, the quiet one, the invisible one. Emma's breath caught in her throat as her father's words echoed through the grand room. "You will marry him, Emma. You will marry Alexander Hart. This is not about love. This is about survival." She looked around the room, her vision blurring as candle flames flickered against golden frames. Her mother's eyes carried no softness, only urgency. Her uncle, seated in the corner, nodded with grim approval. It was as if they were sealing a deal, and she was merely the currency. Her voice quivered as she whispered, "But he does not even know me. He is not even awake." Her mother cut her off sharply. "That is not important. What matters is the name, the connection, and the security it brings. Do not forget, child, that without this marriage, everything we own could slip through our fingers." Emma's heart pounded harder. She imagined the cold walls of a hospital room, the still figure of Alexander Hart lying motionless, and herself standing beside him as a bride made of duty rather than devotion. The thought twisted her stomach, yet she felt the invisible chains tightening. The family's lawyer cleared his throat and placed a pen on the contract. "Sign here, Miss Emma. Once this is done, all obligations are met. You will have fulfilled your family's duty." "Oh." Her hand hovered over the paper, the pen trembling between her fingers. It felt as though the world was holding its breath, waiting for her to fall into the role she had never wanted. In that moment, Emma realized this was not just ink on paper. It was a sentence, binding her life to a man who might never open his eyes again. Outside, thunder rolled across the night sky, a storm gathering its strength. Inside, Emma lowered her gaze, a single tear sliding down her cheek as the pen scratched her name across the page. She had just sealed her fate. But what Emma did not know was that this forced vow, this false marriage born out of pressure and despair, would become the beginning of a truth more powerful than any lie her family had written. And the man in the hospital bed, silent and still, would one day change everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and destiny. The wedding had been a quiet affair, rushed through the motions with no music, no celebration, and no joy. Emma stood in the hospital chapel, a pale figure in a simple ivory gown her mother had chosen. The fabric hung loosely from her frame, making her look like a shadow of the bride her sister was meant to be. The vows were spoken mechanically, the signatures written in silence, and the only witness to her trembling, "I do," was the steady rhythm of machines from the intensive care unit down the hall. That night, Emma moved into the Hart family estate. The mansion was vast, towering with chandeliers and marble staircases, yet it felt colder than the hospital room where Alexander lay unconscious. Every echo of her footsteps reminded her she did not belong here. Servants bowed politely, but glanced at her with confusion and curiosity. In their eyes, she was not the rightful wife. She was an impostor, a stand-in, a reluctant stranger draped in the name of Hart. Her bedroom was lavish, covered in gold accents, heavy curtains, and a bed so large she felt swallowed whole. Yet none of it brought comfort. She sat by the window in silence, staring out at the manicured gardens glistening under the moonlight. The thought repeated in her mind, "What have I done?" The next morning, Emma was escorted to the hospital to sit by Alexander's side. Her role as his new wife had already been written into every newspaper headline. Hart heirs bride by his side in tragic trial. She winced reading the bold letters, knowing the truth beneath them. She was not his choice. She was not even his love. She was a substitute filling a contract. Inside the hospital room, Alexander lay motionless, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that kept him alive. His face was pale but striking, with strong features that even illness could not erase. Emma pulled a chair closer and sat quietly, unsure of what a wife was supposed to do in this surreal situation. She reached for his hand. It was cold to the touch, yet steady with life. For a long moment, she simply stared at their joined hands, the contrast of his stillness against her trembling fingers. "I do not know if you can hear me," she whispered, her voice breaking in the sterile air. "But I promise I will not abandon you. Even if this is not love, even if this is duty, I will not leave you alone." As the days turned into weeks, Emma's routine revolved around the hospital. She read books aloud to him, watered the flowers his secretary left by the window, and sat through endless updates from doctors who spoke with cautious tones. Her presence did not change his condition, but slowly, she noticed something strange. His heart monitor seemed to quicken when her voice grew emotional. His fingers twitched once when she accidentally fell asleep beside him, her head resting on the edge of his bed. The staff dismissed it as random reflexes, but Emma could not ignore the feeling that he was responding. A connection, fragile and impossible, seemed to stretch between them. Each time she held his hand, she felt a spark of something deeper, something that frightened and comforted her at once. Back at the mansion, whispers grew louder. Board members of Hart Enterprises questioned the legitimacy of the marriage. Relatives eyed her with suspicion, wondering if she was a schemer who married into wealth. Her mother's letters reminded her daily, "Do not forget why you are there. Secure the family standing. Do not fail us." Emma carried the weight of every demand on her shoulders, but when she returned to Alexander's side, the outside world faded. In the stillness of his hospital room, she could breathe. She could confess her fears without judgment, and though he remained silent, his presence anchored her in ways she did not understand. One evening, as rain lashed against the windows, Emma leaned closer to him. Her tears spilled freely as she whispered, "Alexander, if you can hear me, I do not care about the contracts, or the fortune, or the lies. I just want you to live. Please, open your eyes. Please, come back." The monitor beside him spiked, beeping faster in response. Emma gasped, her hand tightening around his. For the first time, she felt hope surge within her chest. Something was stirring, and deep inside, she knew this was not the end of their story. It was only the beginning of something neither of them had chosen, but both of them would come to face. Emma's days turned into a fragile rhythm, balancing between the cold corridors of the hospital and the vast emptiness of the Hart mansion. Each morning she sat beside Alexander's bed, reading from the novels he once favored, the ones she had discovered in his private library. Each night she returned to a bed too large and a silence too heavy, her mind replaying the faint twitch of his fingers, the subtle change in his breathing whenever she spoke. One afternoon, while the sun filtered softly through the hospital blinds, Emma noticed something different. As she read aloud, Alexander's hand gave the faintest squeeze. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. "Alexander, did you just move?" she whispered. For a moment there was only silence, but then his eyelids fluttered ever so slightly. Tears welled in Emma's eyes. She leaned closer, whispering with trembling hope. "Please, if you can hear me, fight your way back. You are not alone." The doctors dismissed her claims, calling them reflexes, but Emma was convinced otherwise. Every day she noticed small signs, his heartbeat racing when she confessed her fears, his lips twitching as though he was trying to form words. To the world, he was still a man trapped in a coma. To her, he was listening, struggling, and somehow reaching out. Back at the mansion, Emma's life grew more complicated. Relatives of the Hart family began visiting, their polite smiles thinly veiled with suspicion. They questioned her role, her worth, her presence in a home that was never meant to be hers. "You are here only because Grace cannot be," one aunt said coldly during dinner. "Do not think for a moment that makes you one of us." Emma forced a small smile, swallowing the sting of those words, but inside, her spirit wavered. Late at night, she sat by her window, gazing at the gardens bathed in silver moonlight. "I am nothing but a placeholder," she murmured to herself. Yet even as doubt consumed her, she felt the memory of Alexander's hand tightening around hers. That single, fragile gesture gave her the strength to return to his side each day. One stormy evening, Emma was alone in his room. The rain struck the windows with relentless force, and thunder rolled across the city. She clutched his hand tightly, whispering through her tears. "They all think I am a fraud. They believe I do not belong here. But Alexander, when I am beside you, I feel as if I finally have a purpose. If you can hear me, please, give me a sign. Let me know I am not alone in this." The heart monitor beeped louder, faster. Emma gasped, staring at the screen. Alexander's eyelids twitched, his chest heaved, and a faint sound escaped his lips. It was not clear, not strong, but it was real. Emma's tears fell freely as she clung to his hand. "You are fighting," she whispered. "You are coming back." The doctors rushed in moments later, their expressions shifting from skepticism to surprise. They examined him carefully, whispering among themselves. Emma stood back, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and joy. For the first time since this forced marriage began, hope felt tangible. That night, as she returned to the empty mansion, Emma could not shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The whispers of suspicion from the family, the pressure of the contract, the weight of duty, all of it seemed small compared to the possibility that Alexander might wake. She stood before the ornate mirror in her room, staring at her reflection. Her eyes were tired, her shoulders heavy with responsibility, yet a faint spark glimmered within her. "If he wakes," she whispered softly to herself, "what will he think of me? Will he see me as a stranger forced into his life, or will he see the woman who never left his side?" The question lingered in the air, unanswered, as the storm raged on outside. Emma pressed her hand against the glass, her reflection staring back with equal parts fear and determination. She did not know what awaited her, but deep within, she understood that the path ahead would test her heart in ways she had never imagined. And in the quiet hum of the hospital machines, Alexander Hart's fight to return had already begun. Emma's hope had grown stronger after that night when Alexander's lips had moved and his chest had heaved as if struggling against the silence of his coma. The doctors had begun to monitor him with greater attention, whispering among themselves about possible improvements, though none would commit to predictions. Emma did not need predictions. She had seen with her own eyes the signs that he was fighting, and that belief kept her steadfast by his side. But with hope came shadows. The Hart family board members were growing restless. Emma had been summoned to the grand dining hall of the estate, a place where chandeliers glittered above polished mahogany and every chair was filled with sharp-eyed relatives. She sat at the far end, feeling their judgment settle heavily upon her. "You must understand," one of Alexander's uncles said, his voice deep and commanding, "that the company cannot remain in uncertainty. Shareholders are anxious. Without Alexander's leadership, we risk collapse, and without a legitimate heir by his side, our rivals will exploit every weakness." Emma clasped her hands in her lap, her knuckles white. "I am his wife," she said softly, forcing her voice to stay steady. Laughter rippled across the table, cold and dismissive. One aunt leaned forward, her jeweled fingers tapping the table. "You are his wife only by name, child. We all know why you were placed here, a substitute bride to keep the press satisfied. Do not mistake a contract for acceptance. Oh. Her heart sank, but she met their gazes with quiet resolve. I may not have been his choice, but I am here. I sit with him every day. I will not abandon him. Their murmurs filled the hall, but the board's intentions were clear. They saw Emma as an obstacle, a fragile barrier they could push aside when convenient. As she walked out of that room, their voices lingered in her mind like venom. That evening, back in Alexander's hospital room, Emma sat holding his hand, her voice trembling as she poured out her fears. They want to erase me, Alexander. To them I am nothing but a shadow, but when I sit here with you, I feel as though my existence matters. Please, wake up. Show them they cannot decide our lives without you. For a brief moment, his hand twitched again, stronger than before. Emma gasped, pressing her forehead against his arm, tears spilling freely. She whispered, I know you are fighting. Please, do not give up. The days that followed grew heavier with tension. Rumors spread of schemes within the family, whispers of moving Alexander's assets, and even suggestions that Emma should step aside once Grace returned. Each rumor pressed on her chest like a stone, yet she refused to back away from his side. One stormy night, as lightning cut across the sky, Emma found herself dozing in the chair beside his bed. The sound of thunder jolted her awake, and in that moment she felt his fingers wrapping faintly around hers. She lifted her gaze and saw his eyes, heavy but open, staring at her for the very first time. Emma's breath caught, her heart slamming in her chest. Alexander, she whispered, her voice breaking with disbelief. His lips parted, a faint whisper escaping. She leaned closer, straining to hear. Who are you? The words were broken, weak, but they pierced her soul. Tears blurred her vision as she held onto his hand tighter. I am Emma, she whispered. I am your wife. Confusion flickered in his gaze, his brow furrowing as if searching for answers hidden in the fog of his mind. Emma pressed his hand against her cheek, her tears falling onto his skin. It was not supposed to be this way, she whispered. But I have been here, every day, waiting for you to come back. The monitor beeped steadily, the storm raged outside, and for the first time since the forced wedding, Alexander's eyes remained open, locked on the woman fate had placed by his side. Hope had become reality, but reality was more complicated than Emma could have ever imagined. Alexander's eyes remained open, though faint with exhaustion. The hospital lights reflected in his gaze as he studied the face of the woman seated beside him. His lips trembled as he spoke again, his voice hoarse from months of silence. You are not Grace. Emma's breath hitched, her chest tightening with guilt. She clung to his hand, her tears threatening to spill. No, I am not Grace, she whispered. I am Emma, your wife, though not by your choice. Confusion clouded his expression, his brows furrowing as fragments of memory collided in his mind. Wife? He repeated, his tone heavy with disbelief. I was supposed to marry Grace. Emma lowered her gaze, unable to bear the sharp truth in his words. Yes, you were, but Grace, she was not here. And the family, they forced me into this. I never wanted to deceive you. I only wanted to stand by you, even if I was nothing more than a placeholder. Alexander's breathing quickened, the monitor beeping in rhythm with his rising tension. Why? Why would they do this? Emma shook her head, her voice trembling. The company, the fortune, the alliances. To them, it was not about love, but survival. They believed this marriage would hold everything together. I signed because I had no choice. And yet, I stayed because I could not abandon you. Silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of machines. Alexander turned his head slightly, his eyes searching hers. He saw the exhaustion carved into her features, the sincerity in her trembling words. For a long moment, he said nothing, and Emma feared his judgment would cut deeper than the coldest words. Finally, his voice rasped through the quiet. You stayed, even though you were forced? Emma nodded, clutching his hand tighter. Every day. I read to you. I prayed for you. I begged for you to return. They may see me as an imposter, but I could not let you face this alone. A faint flicker of something passed through Alexander's gaze. Confusion, gratitude, perhaps even a fragile spark of trust. He closed his eyes briefly, gathering strength. When he opened them again, his voice was stronger, though still soft. I do not know what to make of this, but I remember something. A voice. A warmth. Was it you? Emma's tears fell freely. Yes, she whispered. It was always me. The tension in his body eased, and for the first time since awakening, Alexander's hand pressed against hers with intention rather than reflex. Emma felt the weight of that simple gesture, a fragile bridge forming between them. But outside the hospital walls, storms of a different kind gathered. The news of Alexander's awakening spread quickly, reaching the ears of board members and family alike. Rumors swirled of changes in power, of hidden contracts, of betrayal within the Hart Empire. That evening, when Emma returned to the mansion, she was met with cold stares and whispered accusations. One cousin sneered as she passed. Do not think his awakening secures your place. When he learns the truth, you will be cast out like the impostor you are. Emma's heart wavered, but she straightened her shoulders, whispering to herself, I will not leave his side, no matter what they say. Back in his hospital room, Alexander drifted between sleep and wakefulness, his mind torn between past promises and present truths. Grace's image haunted him, yet Emma's voice echoed louder, grounding him in the here and now. As night deepened, Emma returned to his side. She rested her hand on his, her voice steady, though her heart trembled. We may not have chosen this beginning, Alexander, but perhaps we can choose what comes next. The monitor's steady rhythm filled the room, and in his fragile smile, Emma saw the first glimmer of a future neither of them had expected. It was not love yet, but it was something real, a truth born from endurance, not deception. And though danger loomed beyond the hospital walls, in that quiet moment, Emma allowed herself to believe in the fragile hope that their story was only beginning. Alexander's recovery was slow but steady. With each passing day, his strength returned little by little. Nurses helped him sit upright, doctors encouraged him to speak longer sentences, and Emma remained at his side through it all. She spoon-fed him soup when his hands trembled, adjusted his pillows when he struggled to breathe comfortably, and read aloud to him, as if her voice could anchor him to the world he had almost left behind. But with each new step forward came heavier questions. One evening, when the hospital room was quiet except for the faint hum of machines, Alexander turned to her. His voice was raspy, but his gaze was sharp. Emma, I need the truth. Why did you stay? You could have walked away once you signed the contract, yet you did not. Emma's chest tightened. She lowered her eyes, her fingers tightening around the edge of the blanket. Because, Alexander, I could not bear the thought of you lying here alone. I know I was forced into this, but when I heard your heartbeat quicken at my voice, when I saw your fingers twitch, I realized you were still fighting, and I wanted to fight with you. He studied her, his expression unreadable. And Grace? He asked softly. Where is she? Emma's throat went dry. She disappeared months ago. No one knows where she is. They did not tell you because the family was more concerned with appearances and control than with the truth. Silence hung between them, heavy and suffocating. Alexander's jaw tightened, his knuckles pale against the sheets. So they used you. They turned you into a pawn to protect the Hart name. Emma nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, but I am not asking for forgiveness, Alexander. I am only asking you to believe that I never meant to deceive you. Every word I spoke to you, every hour I sat here, was real. His eyes lingered on her, searching, measuring. For the first time, Emma felt the weight of his authority, the quiet power that had once commanded boardrooms and bent rivals to his will. And yet, behind that strength, she glimpsed something else: doubt, weariness, even vulnerability. The next morning, Alexander asked to see the board of Hart Enterprises. Word spread quickly, and by afternoon the hospital's private conference room was filled with sharp suits and colder stares. Emma stood at his side, her heart pounding as the meeting began. Alexander, though weak, held himself with quiet dignity. His voice was still gravelly, but each word carried undeniable force. You all doubted me, he said, his gaze sweeping the room. You whispered about power, about fortune, about replacing me before I even had a chance to wake. And yet, when I was at my weakest, who among you stayed? Who among you believed I would return? The room fell silent. Emma felt dozens of eyes turned toward her, some with disdain, some with reluctant respect. Alexander's hand, resting on the table, brushed against hers under the surface. "She stayed," he said firmly. "Emma, the woman you dismissed as a placeholder, she stayed when none of you did." Murmurs rippled through the board, but Alexander silenced them with a single glance. "From this day forward, do not question her place at my side. She is my wife, whether by fate or by contract. And I will not tolerate her being treated as anything less." Emma's breath caught, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. She looked at him, tears welling in her eyes. For the first time, he had defended her not out of obligation, but out of choice. But even as warmth spread through her chest, she knew the battle was far from over. The Hart family had secrets, and whispers of betrayal still lingered in every corner of the empire. That night, as Alexander rested, Emma sat by his bedside, her hand wrapped around his. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a small smile. "We may not know what tomorrow brings," she whispered, "but I believe in us. No matter what comes." And though shadows loomed beyond the hospital walls, Emma felt the fragile spark between them begin to glow brighter. It was not yet love, but it was trust, and trust was the first step towards something real. The days following Alexander's declaration to the board were filled with both tension and fragile hope. His words had silenced them for the moment, but Emma could feel the storm brewing underneath. Relatives whispered in corridors, business partners exchanged sharp glances, and every newspaper headline speculated on the unusual marriage between the heir of Hart Enterprises and the quiet woman no one had known before. Emma carried the weight of their judgment in silence. She continued her routine at the hospital, speaking softly to Alexander, helping him regain his strength. Yet, behind her calm demeanor, her heart was heavy. The memory of his question still echoed in her mind. "You are not Grace." She feared that when his strength fully returned, he would cast her aside, just as the family expected. One evening, while Emma sat by his bed, Alexander studied her closely. His voice was firmer now, though still touched with weariness. "You have been honest with me, Emma. But honesty does not erase the truth. You are here because of their schemes. And I cannot ignore the shadow of Grace." Emma's chest tightened. She lowered her gaze, whispering, "I know. That is why I will step away when you are strong enough. I was never meant to be your wife, Alexander. I was never meant to hold this place." His eyes narrowed, frustration flickering across his face. "And yet, you stayed when no one else did. Do you not see what that means?" Tears stung Emma's eyes, but she forced herself to smile through them. "It means I cared for you as a human being, not as an empire or a fortune. But the world will never see it that way. To them, I am only a fraud." Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. The following morning, Emma received a letter slipped under her door at the mansion. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the page. The words were sharp, written in haste. "Leave while you can. You are not safe. The truth about Grace will destroy you both." Her heart pounded as she read the warning again and again. Someone within the family knew more than they admitted, and whatever secret they guarded was powerful enough to threaten not only her, but Alexander as well. That evening, Emma chose not to tell him about the letter. Instead, she sat by his side, her smile faint but steady. She read to him as she always had, her voice calm though fear gnawed at her soul. Alexander watched her, his eyes narrowing with quiet perception. Though she hid her pain well, he could sense the weight pressing down on her. For the first time since awakening, he reached for her hand, not out of weakness, but out of intent. "Emma," he said softly, "whatever happens, you will not face it alone. Do you understand?" Her lips parted, and for a moment her mask slipped. Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. And in that simple exchange, a fragile bond grew stronger, even as unseen shadows gathered, waiting for their chance to strike. The letter haunted Emma. She hid it in the bottom drawer of her nightstand, but its warning echoed in her thoughts day and night. Who had written it? What secret about Grace could be so dangerous that it threatened both her and Alexander? Meanwhile, Alexander's strength continued to return. He could walk short distances with the help of a cane, his voice was clearer, and his presence carried the same quiet authority that once commanded entire boardrooms. Yet beneath that authority, Emma could see the shadow of doubt. Every time Grace's name was mentioned, his gaze darkened, and silence settled like a wall between them. One evening, as Emma helped him back into bed after a long session with his therapist, Alexander looked at her sharply. "You are hiding something from me," he said. His tone was calm but steady, leaving no room for evasion. Emma froze, her hands stilling on the blanket. Her heart raced. She wanted to tell him about the letter, about the warning that gnawed at her conscience. But fear tightened her throat. I only worry about your health," she whispered. His eyes lingered on her for a long moment before he nodded. "Very well. But remember this, Emma. Secrets, no matter how small, have a way of destroying everything." That night, unable to sleep, Emma walked through the quiet halls of the mansion. The portraits of heart ancestors loomed down at her, their painted eyes filled with judgment. In the study, she overheard voices low, urgent, and unmistakably hostile. She pressed herself against the door, listening. "She will ruin everything if she stays," a man's voice hissed. "The marriage was never meant to last. Once Grace returns, Emma will be discarded. We cannot allow her influence over Alexander to grow." Another voice replied, colder still. "Then we act before he regains full control. If Alexander learns the truth about Grace, all of us will be finished." Emma's blood ran cold. The warning letter had not been a bluff. Something dark was being hidden, and the family was willing to destroy her to protect it. The next day, as she sat beside Alexander, she tried to mask her fear, but he saw it in her trembling hands, in the way her voice faltered. "Emma," he said firmly, taking her hand in his, "whatever it is, tell me. I cannot protect you if you keep silent." Tears welled in her eyes, but she shook her head. "Not yet. Please trust me." For the first time, frustration burned openly in his gaze. Yet, beneath it was something else: concern, perhaps even care. He pressed her hand tightly and whispered, "Then promise me one thing. Do not face it alone." Emma nodded, but her heart knew the truth. Whatever secret the family was hiding about Grace, it would soon come crashing down upon them both. And when it did, their fragile bond would be tested in ways neither of them was prepared to face.